The woods can offer solitude, peace away from the noise of the real world. But the trees can also conceal the darkest secrets, the worst of mankind's evil doings, sometimes very literally. A wych elm tree, a traumatizing discovery, and mysterious graffiti asking, "Who put Bella in the wych elm?" The question has gone unanswered for nearly 75 years after a woman was found dead in the Cayleigh Woods in the United Kingdom. They called her Bella, but her true identity remains unknown, and she is still nameless. The morning of April 18th, 1943, in Stourbridge, England, a group of young boys, Tommy Willits, Robert Hart, Fred Payne, and Bob Farmer, were sneaking through the Cayleigh Woods, which sat on the edge of a private estate owned by a Lord Cobham, hunting for birds' nests when they spotted a tree. An old, dead wych elm. Thinking there might have been birds' nests tucked away in the higher branches, the eldest, 15-year-old Bob, climbed up. And when he looked down into the hollow tree trunk, though, he was struck silent by what he saw. At first, he thought he was staring into the empty eye sockets of an animal skull, but then he noted the patch of hair and the crooked teeth and realized he was staring at a very real, very human skull. Rightfully horrified, he showed his friends what he'd found, and fearing the repercussions of trespassing on private land, the boys swear an oath of silence and part ways. However, the youngest of the group, Tommy Willits, was so disturbed by what he saw, he told his father about the body in the wych elm, and when Warwick police arrived, things only got stranger. They extracted the skeleton from the tree, almost entirely intact, save for the right hand, which appeared to have been sawed off. Further investigation revealed the severed hand had been buried near the tree. But things only grew darker from there as authorities tried to unravel the mystery of Bella in the wych elm. Pathologist and Professor James Webster performed the autopsy and concluded the skeleton was female and around 35 years of age. She had mousy brown hair and was approximately 5 feet tall and had crooked teeth with several fillings, indicating she'd had dental surgery within the last year or so. From her bones, he could tell she'd given birth at least once. Webster also determined that she'd been placed inside of the wych elm when her body was still warm, as she wouldn't have been able to fit after rigor mortis set in. Stuffed in the back of the body's mouth was a piece of taffeta cloth, and Webster concluded she'd likely been asphyxiated. Among the remnants of her clothing, he also found a gold ring on her left ring finger, possibly indicating she'd been married or engaged to be married. Police painstakingly weed through a list of every dentist within the country looking for records that match up with the victim's teeth, but there are no hits within the borders of England, so they carefully investigate and eliminate 3,000 missing persons cases from the area as possibilities. 6 months go by, and the authorities are just as far away from identifying their victim and her killer as they ever were, but it wasn't necessarily a lack of investigative skills or influence. Britain was in the midst of World War II, so while headlines of the Tree Riddle murder spread throughout the country, it was overshadowed by war news and from the continually growing list of people going missing due to circumstances surrounding the war. Soon the dead woman in the tree slipped from everyone's mind. Then something happened that chilled the public and police to the bone. A line of graffiti splashed across an old brick wall near Old Hill, Birmingham read, "Who put Lou Bella down the wych elm?" Then another question appeared also in Birmingham on Upper Dean Street. This one read, "Who put Bella down the wych elm, Cayleigh Wood?" The handwriting of the first message matched the second. Then, more similar messages began popping up all over the country, with the most famous variation of the question being, "Who put Bella in the wych elm?" The eerie messages reminded locals of the woman found in the tree, whom they now called Bella, and concerned that the original writer of the message might be involved in the crime, police attempted to track down the author, but were ultimately unsuccessful. It didn't help that over the course of the next several decades, Bella's remains would go missing after changing hands to several of Professor Webster's colleagues who were conducting unofficial tests on the body, and whether their disappearance was by accident or intent to conceal is unknown. But regardless, Bella's final resting place remains a mystery. Investigators still had nothing, and yet the graffiti messages took on a life of their own, with the most famous one being scrawled across the 200-year-old Wychbury obelisk close to the Hagley Woods where the body was found. The message even spread beyond borders throughout the UK and to other parts of Europe. This obviously caused many to ask, who is Bella? A question that unfortunately remains unanswered, along with many others. Answers are scarce and questions abundant in this case. How did this woman meet such a grisly end, and who was responsible for the pointed graffiti that suggested that someone knew more than they were revealing? But the biggest questions were, obviously, who put Bella in the wych elm, and who was Bella herself? When you have more questions than answers, people begin to form their theories in order to satisfy that question mark. And for this case, they range in everything from a slain prostitute to an espionage murder plot involving undercover Nazi agents. Some have suggested that because no friends and family came forward to identify Bella, that maybe she was living on the outskirts of society, possibly working as a prostitute. This theory was considered in 1944 when a prostitute from Birmingham reported a fellow prostitute who went by the name Bella went missing on Hagley Road in 1941, around the time of the unidentified body's death. Still, police didn't have enough substantial evidence to follow up on this lead. Those who seemed more fascinated with the gruesome details of the case questioned, why was Bella's hand sawn off, and why was it buried beneath the tree? This led to wild speculations of witchcraft and occult involvement. 2 years after the body was discovered, Professor Margaret Murray proposed her own theory concerning Bella's death. She believed Bella had been part of a ritualistic murder known as the Hand of Glory, in which a dried and pickled hand allegedly gives great powers to its holder. Regardless of this baseless postulation, the press took glee in turning the murder into a spectacle, a tale of witches and blood and the occult, and so it gained gruesome traction amongst the public. The heightened interest of witchcraft in the 1950s and the strange graffiti, combined with the press's willingness to publish the outlandish claims, may all contribute to the case's near urban legend status. However, this theory was pure speculation and had no physical evidence to corroborate it. So now we move on to our theories of undercover agents and the Nazi reign and World War II, just to give you an idea of the state of things at the time of the body's discovery and the subsequent investigation. In 1953, years after Bella's discovery and the war's end, a woman writing under the pseudonym Anna contacted the Wolverhampton Express and Star, claiming she had previously unreleased information concerning the identity of Bella. Obviously, police are intrigued by this and they meet with Anna to gather her story, and Anna turned out to be a woman named Una Mossop. In Una's confession, she claims that in 1941 her husband, Jack Mossop, was working for a munitions factory, a plant that made bombs, shells, cartridges, etc. This meant he had information that the Nazi spies would have been very interested in, as gaining intelligence on their enemies' munitions factories would allow them to coordinate attacks, such as the Birmingham Blitz. Jack confessed he'd been feeding information to a Nazi agent named Van Ralt, and Van Ralt in turn passed that information to a Dutch woman, also working undercover for the Nazi party. She made her living masquerading around the area as a cabaret dancer, and from what I can tell, Una Mossop never learned the name of this woman. So then Jack reveals the supposedly horrifying truth of what happened one night in 1941. He claimed he met Van Ralt and the Dutch woman at a local pub where the two Nazi spies were in a heated argument. Van Ralt ordered Jack to transport them to Clint Hills, and Jack complied. During the drive, the argument escalates to the point of violence, and Van Ralt strangles the woman to death in the back seat. Afraid for his life, Jack assisted Van Ralt in carrying the body deep into the Hagley Woods and helped conceal it in a hollow tree. After the incident, Jack Mossop's nightmares were haunted by the image of a woman staring at him from inside a tree, and he was eventually committed to Stratford Mental Hospital and died there before Bella's body was discovered. Una's account was leaked to the press, and the public, coming off the cusp of war, entering into the Cold War, were all too eager to buy into the espionage theory. And police found it odd that Una had waited an entire decade to offer her information, but they still followed up, obviously, only to be met with dead ends. And Bella's case faded from the public eye once again until about 15 years later in the late 1960s when the second espionage theory is published. In 1968, a man named Donald McCormick published a book titled Murder by Witchcraft on the Wych Elm murder. Despite the title, his theory falls more in line with the previous one. He speculated that Bella was a well-known undercover Nazi agent and an occultist whose full name was Clarabella Dronkers.
Clarabella allegedly was the girlfriend of a fellow Nazi agent who went by the name Lehrer. When she was recruited by the German intelligence service, her code name became Clara. McCormick's theory seemed far-fetched, but his sources came from official German intelligence records that documented Agent Clara's last known whereabouts somewhere near the West Midlands in 1941.
She was supposed to make radio contact once she'd landed, but was never heard from or seen again. And interestingly, one of the graffiti sites specifically referred to Clarabella in the Wych Elm instead of just Bella. However, this was far from credible evidence, since tracing the multitudes of graffiti back to any one person seemed nearly impossible and illogical. There was some interesting information that aligned with McCormick's theory, however.
A real Nazi spy captured near the same area in 1941 was named Johannes Marinus Dronkers. One might draw the parallel that Johannes Dronkers was possibly the husband of Clarabella Dronkers, and her fellow Nazi agent, Lehrer, was her secret, or perhaps not so secret, lover. A British soldier who possessed Nazi documents listing undercover operatives confirmed that there was a Clara that vaguely matched Bella's description, who was parachuted into the area near Hagley Wood in 1941.
Any of the theories that speculate Bella was foreign are entirely possible, as her dental records couldn't be located within England, nor could she be traced to any missing persons case within the country. However, with little way to prove the accuracy of this claim, another theory blossomed 3 decades later. So, 30 years later, the investigation officially closes, but then a previously unreleased wartime document from the United Kingdom's intelligence agency, known as MI5, is released and offers a shocking possibility of the identity of Bella. In 1941, the MI5 interrogate a German-born man named Joseph Jacobs. Now, Jacobs was linked to the German intelligence service, though it's been falsely reported that he was linked to the secret Nazi police, which is absolutely untrue according to his granddaughter, G.K. Jacobs. So this man with ties to the German intelligence service is arrested by Home Guard after he parachuted into Cambridgeshire in 1941.
At the time of his arrest, he was carrying a photograph of a woman with him, a woman that turned out to be named Clara Bäuerle. Jacobs told investigators that Clara was his lover, and he'd first become acquainted with her at the Café Dreyer in Hamburg, Germany. Clara Bäuerle also allegedly had significant ties to senior Nazis, so she was tagged as an agent and set to parachute after Jacobs established radio contact in the same area.
But Jacobs had been captured before he was able to do so, and not long after his capture, he was executed by firing squads on August 15, 1941. He was the last person to be executed at the Tower of London. The MI5 were able to confirm Clara Bäuerle's identity.
She'd been born in Germany in 1906, which put her at age 35 in the year 1941, and she was working as a cabaret artist in the West Midlands. Note, her singing and acting career stopped very suddenly in 1942, a year after Bella's body was found. No live recordings, gramophone recordings, or subsequent movies.
If you think back for a moment to Una Mossop's recounting, she claimed the Dutch woman involved in the Nazi spy ring with her husband was masquerading as a cabaret dancer at the time. There are also, strangely enough, parallels to McCormick's theory that an agent named Clara parachuted into the same area in 1941 and failed to make contact. Not sure if either of those are relevant parallels, but they are interesting ones for sure.
While this isn't confirmed fact, Independent magazine postulated that the German name Clara Bäuerle might have been made to sound more English to adapt to the music hall audiences, and theorized that Clara Bäuerle became Clarabella. All of this might sound like a very compelling argument for the case that Clara was Bella in the Wych Elm. The timelines certainly coincide well. However, there is a document that disproves this theory, it seems, entirely.
G.K. Jacobs, Joseph Jacobs' granddaughter, whom I mentioned earlier, has been researching her grandfather's life for 30 years, and she made an incredible discovery. documented proof that Clara Boyerle passed away in a hospital in Berlin in 1942, not 1941. And while she wasn't murdered, her death was far from glamorous or peaceful, as it states on her death certificate that she died as a result of veronal poisoning.
The symptoms of which can include stupor, mental fogginess or excitement, vertigo, nausea, muscular weakness, coma, thirst, a fever, rash formation, a combination of which can contribute to death. So it seems the theory with the greatest number of parallels has been disproven, and none of the others can be fully proven without the remains of Bella, meaning we may never know the truth.
What we do know is that an unidentified woman suffered an awful fate, and she has never been brought the justice she deserves. Even to this day, every now and again, you might see the message, "Who put Bella in the Wych Elm?" scrawled across deserted city alleyways or subway passages. This is likely due to the eerie nature of the body's placement and the mysterious graffiti being perpetuated by those who have heard of the tale rather than those who actually have any involvement in it. And unfortunately, this murder looks as though it will remain unsolved, partially due to its time of occurrence during the war, partially due to the fact that the remains' whereabouts are unknown, and many of the case files, including the original full autopsy, have also gone missing since, along with the identity of the tragically lost Bella. Special thanks to G.K. Jacobs, whose website and unrelenting search for answers about her grandfather has put to rest one of the most perpetuated theories on the Bella in the Wych Elm case. Her website has a plethora of info on Clara and Joseph Jacobs that was invaluable to me while researching for this, and I'm sure is now invaluable to the narrative of Bella and the Wych Elm, so it's obviously been linked down below. No matter what you believe or what you choose to speculate, I ask you only for respect in the comments, and sources where you can find more cases of the tragically unidentified, and sources for this specific case can be found below as well. Thank you for watching the video. If you did like it, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more from me, you can hit that subscribe button down below. I will see you in the next video. Stay safe, friends, and have a good night.